You don't run away from like emotional pain just because you're celebrated. And also, you can't express yourself, so you can't show anger, sadness, vulnerability, because you're just supposed to show happiness.
Yeah.
So you do suffer because of how much you have to hide.
Why is the golden child sometimes the one who struggles most with identity?
It's important to set some boundaries with people who have chosen to not see you for you.
Okay.
If they continue to deny your reality, then I don't think it's wise for you to stay in those situations.
Ready, set, let's go. I'm on the way up. I'm on the way up. I'm on the way up, going all the way up. I'm on the way up. I'm on the way up. I'm on the way up, going all the way up.
And you're watching the SNS. Hey friends, we trust you are well. Welcome to another episode of Asking for a Friend, brought to you exclusively here on the SNS. Now today we have someone who is, I don't even know if you're a guest, a family, an OG, but I will let her introduce herself.
Yeah, I think I've even missed you guys. So thank you for having me. My name is Melissa Kyoko. I am a psychotherapist practicing in Nairobi, Kenya. I help adults work through trauma, attachment difficulties, loss and grief, and addiction.
Okay, so thank you, Melissa, for coming yet again. The last time you were on this couch, we were talking about embracing your singlehood journey in your 20s. But today we're going to be talking about a topic that I think is often not talked about, at least enough, and this is sibling wounds, the golden child versus the black sheep. So we're going to be delving deep into the emotional fallout of being favored or forgotten, and this is in context of African or Kenyan households. So we're going to start with a disclaimer, and I'll say we talk a lot about family trauma and inner child wounds, but we rarely talk about how these wounds were shaped not just by our parents, but also our siblings. This episode is not in an attempt to throw our siblings under the bus. It's about acknowledging those quiet wars, the silent competitions, and the deep resentment or grief that forms when one child is consistently favored and the other is left out. So this is a space for us to explore what happens when you grow up as either or, the golden child or the black sheep. Now, Melissa, from your professional standpoint, when people hear golden child or black sheep, I think the assumption is always one is lucky and doing phenomenally great. The other one is suffering and struggling and in the gutter trenches. So what is the emotional cost of being placed in either role in a family dynamic? So let's start with defining. What is the golden child and what is the black sheep?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the golden child is often the favorite one.
Yeah.
The one who, the good child. The one who does things right. The one who's idealized by their parents and by the siblings.
Yeah.
So they're just the one who even get like preferential treatment sometimes, and they're kind of just put into that role, sometimes unconsciously or subconsciously. We'll talk about that later.
Yes.
As I talk about the golden child, I'd like to talk about the hero or the caretaker, which sometimes can be confused for the golden child, and sometimes you can be both the hero and the golden child.
Okay.
But now the hero or the caretaker is the one who either emotionally or physically takes care of the family, mostly the parents sometimes, where it's like maybe the parents are struggling or are overwhelmed just by being parents, and so this child often takes up that role. More often than not, it's the firstborn. So sometimes you may find that the golden child is the golden child in terms of being idealized, the good child, the favorite child, but is also the hero and the caretaker because they're always taking care of things in the home and like growing up like really fast. Yeah. And then
The black sheep?
The black sheep. So the black sheep is also called the scapegoat. And this is not the one who's blamed for everything. Basically, in a dysfunctional family, there's so many bad things happening, and this child is blamed for everything. It's like you're not even doing well at school, you know, just everything, everything is on you. And so you carry on that identity even longer in life, and you always feel like the bad one. Basically, you feel like the bad child, you're punished, you're ignored, and all of that. There's more family roles as well. There's the lost child, who is the quiet one, the one who sees that silence is what will save them in a dysfunctional family. So they just keep quiet, and you disconnect out of protecting yourself. So you just go to school, come back home, go to your room, just very, very disconnected from the experience at home as well. And then lastly, I'd like to talk about the mascot.
Okay.
So mascot, just like the mascot in in football games.
Yeah.
That's like the clown, the one who makes jokes to diffuse tension in the home, and also to remove attention from themselves, or to remove attention from any harm that may be going on at home. So sometimes you may find that these roles, a child can play both, like the mascot and like being a scapegoat, or sometimes you're just the mascot, sometimes you're just the lost child. So it's important to see all of those other ones, but I see that the golden child and the black sheep are like commonly the ones that we fall into as siblings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about, because we said earlier that more often than not, the assumption for the golden child, because they are the praised version, they are seen as the pride, often the overachiever, can they still suffer emotionally?
Definitely, definitely. You don't run away from like emotional pain just because you're celebrated. Like you really don't, because you're not being seen. You're being seen as the perfect child. So you're forced into a role where you're constantly not even being authentic, and you have to be perfect. So it's very performative as well, because you can't even say what you truly think about things. Because you'll be told, yeah, you're the strong one, you're the nice one, you're the good one, you perform well at school, and so you keep trying to meet that standard. And then also you can't express yourself, so you can't show anger, sadness, vulnerability, because you're just supposed to show happiness. So you do suffer because of how much you have to hide.
And it's always interesting, because when the golden child attempts to voice out these wounds that they carry, either in the context of like, I'm struggling, or like, it's not always, you often hear people say it wasn't as easy as it looked like. And I guess I'm curious as to how that dynamic plays out with the black sheep, because I think the golden child, people always assume that they don't suffer emotionally. Life has been great, versus the black sheep, they're always just shunned upon. Okay, so maybe let's dive deep into how our parents shape these identities. And I was curious about our birth orders. I don't know if we've had this conversation before, but maybe in briefly about our birth orders. So we have, I guess, the firstborn syndrome, then we have the middle children, and then the lastborns. And I thought maybe we can dive deeper into that and how these labels are formed in our childhood.
I think birth order definitely contributes to how these family roles are assigned. You'll find that more often than not, the golden child or the hero, the caretaker, is really like the firstborn. Because there's a lot of immense pressure put on a firstborn to just perform and just, you know, be a good child. I find that the scapegoat more often than not is like the middle child or the second one, because and this is to say also, you may find that sometimes the scapegoat is not even a bad child. They're just different. They don't fit the family mold. So they're just maybe very creative, whereas the firstborn is more inclined to like school and everything. So sometimes the scapegoat is just different, and you find that middle children are the ones who tend to not be like similar to what they've been told. They question things, they set boundaries, they want to speak up for themselves, and so now you just become the bad child because of that. And then sometimes it's also you're just being punished for being a child, because a lot of times the black sheep is like, I don't know, you played out too late sometimes, but the golden child needed to stay at home to keep the peace. So then, right? And then for lastborn, sometimes I think it's like mascots, like just like, I'm just here for a good time, and let's make jokes and everything. The last one can also be the scapegoat as well, and can also be the lost child, the quiet one, the one who's just overlooked sometimes.
Because from what I've gathered about the identities when it comes to the order in which you were born, more often than not, firstborns, even when it comes to something as simple as, I think, setting boundaries, they command some level of authority. Then the lastborns get leniency. Then the middle children, I think the middle children especially, they are often like the emotional caretakers or absorbers. So a good example here for a scenario, we had said, for example, your sister was treated like a mini wife to, let's say, the father, and then the other child was seen as rebellious because they questioned things, and then another was protected, and then another policed. So when parents assign these roles, is it usually consciously or unconsciously, or is it also something that is heavily reliant on our culture?
All of the above. All
A,
of
B,
the
C,
above,
D, or
yeah.
E. Yeah.
First of all, I think it's important to understand that these family roles form from survival.
Okay.
It's kind of like your family saying, this is your job, shika a job, and
Yeah.
then we can function. Most of the times it comes from an unexamined, unhealed generational trauma.
Yeah.
Because let's say, for example, and I think both consciously to an extent and unconsciously. Unconsciously in that, let's say there's a parent who was underlooked, not seen as a child,
Yeah.
you may find that they will project that onto now the ideal child, their golden child, and live through them. It's like you want to be lived through by that child because you never felt seen.
Yeah.
And then you may find that a parent with unresolved shame may project it now to the scapegoat.
Okay.
Because they don't want to live through the shame that they themselves have, so they want to shame the other child. And sometimes it's very unconscious. It's because you maybe as the scapegoat parent when you were a child, those are the things you used to be told.
Yes.
So you'll tell it to your child.
Yeah, and we pass it on to the next.
Yeah, exactly. And then when a parent is maybe overwhelmed by life, so it can be emotionally, financially, a child will always find their way in taking up that role of being the caretaker.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just a very unconscious thing that parents do. But then again, I mean, it's still parents' responsibility to treat their children at least a little bit equal.
Yeah.
So those are the unconscious ways, I'd say. And then consciously, I'd also see how sometimes parents directly tell you what to be.
Yes.
It's like, you're not like your brother, you're not like your sister.
Or you
you're
should
the
be
stro-
more like your... Yeah.
Exactly. It's like you're so sensitive. Nani is stronger, you know. So it's also sometimes it's the things that your parents tell you. And we are tuned to what feels safe and what will connect us to our parents.
Yeah.
So if I feel like I'm connected to my parents by being the good child, then best believe that's the role I'll play.
Yeah.
So that's why I said it comes from survival. And then a lot of these roles also form in dysfunctional families. So if I already don't feel safe in my home, then I'll play that role if it brings me closer to safety.
So I want us to talk about the golden child a bit more, and especially their hidden wounds, because I think often with this perfectionism or the pressure they have to maintain the good image, it's almost like there's a lot of things behind the wall. So for most golden children, there's the fear of failure, especially letting down the family. And then now when we talk about the world, there's the emotional suppression. So they're never allowed to be messy or sad or even just average. So for most golden children, we see they're constantly praised, but they never feel seen, which is always interesting because you would assume in situations where the black sheep would want to feel seen, this other one, it would want to feel praised or get that validation so that they can be seen. For the golden child, it's the opposite. So I think the question here would be, why is the golden child sometimes the one who struggles most with identity? Because I think we've come to see that a lot. People, you would think these are, you know, it's a born a star, and then, or even like when you think about some of the celebrity autobiographies we read and watch documentaries about, and you're so surprised by someone who would have such, I don't know, favor or stardom, struggling with something as identity, when from the outside looking in, they have a good hold of it.
Yeah, okay. I think I'd like to even use a metaphor.
Yes, please.
I see the golden child as maybe someone in a play. And they're wearing a costume.
Okay.
And this costume, everyone likes it. We like this costume. Keep your costume on. Never remove your costume, right? And life is the stage that play is being set on. So you can never remove that costume. You have to keep that costume on, because anytime you remove it, people are like, who is this?
Yeah.
And so it feels hard to remove that costume. And so you keep wearing it because you must perform, you must please and everything. And so similar to that metaphor, for a golden child, you never have the chance, or rarely have the chance, to ask yourself, okay, who am I outside of being this role that I've played? And so of course you don't know what your identity is outside of it, and you struggle even with self-esteem, because now you wonder, do you like me because of what I do for you, or do you like me because of who I am as a person? But then you never want to actually find out, so you keep performing, and that is quite exhausting, because it's like almost you're telling people, here, see me, but then you also can't, because you're afraid that that will mean people won't appreciate you if they see the real you. And then also, if you struggle to, as a golden child, you already are not being given spaces to talk about how you feel. Like truly, authentically, if you're angry, if you're sad, there's no space for that. And so you're disconnected from yourself. Of course, that's going to cause a lot of identity issues because you don't sit with your emotions first, and then you're also not allowed to express those emotions to anyone.
Okay, so let's talk about now the flip side, so the pain of the black sheep. And I think often there's this I wouldn't call it like I think it's a connotation, even just being a black sheep in general, but also the fact that we assume we are so knowledgeable of the pain and the traumas that they carry. So I think growing up, so from a child to an adult, how does being the black sheep shape one's self-worth, especially when their pain is never validated?
My heart always goes out to the scapegoat because it's really difficult. I'll use another metaphor. I like using
we
metaphors.
love metaphors.
So I think I see the scapegoat as a child walking around with a mirror around their house, and the mirror is facing everyone, and the mirror is showing your family parts of themselves that they like to hide. And so, but then they won't tell you that they're seeing that. They'll tell you that that mirror is wrong. You're even wrong for holding that mirror. So I always see the scapegoat as the person in the family that brings out the truth of what's going on in the family, because more often than not, this is the child that will question, like, okay, why are we doing this? Why are you asking me to do this? And sometimes by just being different, you threaten, like I said, the family mold. This is what we think our family should look like, but you're being different. You know, why are you doing this and your siblings are doing this? So I always see it as you're being made to doubt yourself. You're being made to even doubt how people see you. So there's a lot of self-doubt. And then there's also like chronic self-blame even in adulthood, because you've never been validated. And you search so much for that validation that just like the golden child, you're also disconnected from yourself. Because you're constantly over-explaining yourself, being very defensive. It feels like no one is seeing you, so you have to go over and above for them to see you. Or the opposite of that, you decide to lean into that identity of the bad child and just continue doing, I guess, what your parents would consider bad things or bad behavior.
Which is why I guess we see in most scenarios the black sheep now act out. Now they're just pure. I don't want peace, I want problems always. And the scenario that was painted here was you get a job, you do well as the black sheep, you even move out, but it's only when your sibling speaks that your parents light up, and they still feel like outsiders even in their own bodies and homes. So now let's talk about when siblings internalize the labels, because I think it's one thing for them to identify as I am the black sheep of this family, or I am the golden child, the lost child, the mascot, which thank you by the way for sharing all of those. I had no idea about those ones. But then now when they start to internalize those labels, and then the tension it creates between siblings. So the scenario here is you love your brother or sister or whoever, but you also can't help but hate how they were always picked over you. You both have your individual traumas, but they don't feel equal. So the question would be, what kind of tension does this create between siblings, and especially in their adulthood?
I think from a very young age, there's a lot of pent-up resentment. Because the sibling wounds, I feel like, it's not about what happened, it's about what we didn't speak about. It's about, even I usually see it as grief. It's a grief of the sibling relationship I never had. It's a grief of my parents never treated me the way they treated you. And so you end up resenting each other, but then you never talk about it as well.
But that's a good question, Melissa, because how do I come to a sibling? Would that mean you have to admit that there are feelings of resentment? I guess like when we name the emotion like resentment, it looks like but you get what I'm saying. So I'm curious as to, even before we say that there's a conversation to be had, how are we even having these conversations? Maybe let's play it out. Let's just assume I am the black sheep and you are the golden child, and you want to have the conversation with me. You can start. Oh, I'm the black sheep. Okay, sorry. I need to remember that.
So I start.
Yes.
Okay, what would a golden child tell? Are we playing out the conversation to healing, or the... Okay.
Yes, to heal, or rather to understand. Because I'm assuming even when there are these feelings of resentment, it also creates like an emotional distance between the siblings.
Definitely.
So we want to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you as the golden child, you are aware, and so am I, but we've never had the conversation. So let's have a chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, it would be like, Steph, you know, I've been feeling like there's so much pressure on me to be like the best child, and I feel like you can just let off by being anything you want, you do whatever you want, but me, I just have to be good.
Yeah, but you're talking about your pressure, and have you ever thought about what it's been like for me?
But how can you have pressure? The pressure is all on me.
Yeah, but then you guys never want to like internalize and look at the shit that you guys are going through, and you always want to use me as the problem.
So like, what has been going on for you? Maybe you can tell me.
A, B, C, D, X, Y, and Z. Okay, so
Yeah.
then I can see how it would play out. I guess I was
Yeah.
curious as to how that conversation would start in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, but yes, you were telling us the type of tension that it creates between siblings in their adulthood.
Yeah, so there's that unspoken resentment.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, there's a lot of like grief that you don't get to realize, because anyone wants to have a great sibling relationship from like an early age. You don't want to fix it much later.
Yeah.
So you're also just constantly seeing you're becoming farther and farther and farther apart, and it's just very hurtful. And then in adulthood, that's now looks like, oh, I haven't even talked to my sister in 3 months. I haven't talked to my sister, right? So there's a lot of distance and unspoken conflicts, and you're just like, yeah, I have a sister, but
Yeah, it is what it is.
It creates a lot of distance for sure.
Yeah.
And then I think healing a lot of these sibling wounds is just like we've played out, having conversations, but
Yeah.
both parties need to be willing to, in order for you to have that
acknowledge.
conversation. And the conversation should be met with curiosity.
Okay.
So it's like, what was that experience like for you? And then I'm also able to share what the experience was like for me, because we were both trying to cope in an environment that didn't handle our emotions well. It's just that we coped differently.
Yeah.
So it's these wounds and these roles are all survival mechanisms for both parents and children. So it's also seeing that, not blaming your parents, not blaming each other, and then also acknowledging how maybe me as a golden child have harmed you as a scapegoat, and how you as a scapegoat you've harmed me as a golden child. Yeah.
I'm curious, even from your professional standpoint, should these conversations happen, would it be wise to involve the parent? I said, don't do it. Yeah.
I think if the parents have done their own inner work, because if, let's say, I am a parent who was the scapegoat, and then my kids bring this conversation, I'm already coming with that role in my mind. So it will be difficult for me as a parent to see where my kids are coming from. But if I, as a parent, have worked through these things, I can actually take accountability. Then I'll be like, yeah, sure. But I think it's important for the siblings to have these conversations by themselves. Because at the end of the day, your parents were doing what felt right to them. So your parent will never come and tell you. Some have, but in the Kenyan context, I mean, let's be honest, it's rare for a parent to come and tell you that, you know they did you wrong. Sometimes they minimize all of that and are defensive, or just deny it completely.
And which leads to the next point, because for both the golden child, the black sheep, all these roles people are playing, I guess to its core there's almost a need for people to acknowledge their pain. But now what happens when the parents still deny it all? Because Kenyan parents, almost African parents in our context, rarely ever apologize, rarely ever acknowledge there is a world where they did something wrong, and you're always going to be, it will be shoved down your throat that we treated you the same, you are very ungrateful. So I guess I'm curious how, for both roles, how do you honor, and I know people throw this word a lot, but truly your inner child's experience, even when your parents refuse to acknowledge the role that they played?
I think first is to just come to an acceptance that your healing will never be reliant on anyone else. And this is even outside the context of what we're talking about. When you hold on to your healing to someone else coming and tell you, okay, I hurt you, it's very invalidating. First of all, you're invalidating your own self by thinking that if someone comes and apologizes to you, then you can heal. So it's first letting go of the idea that your healing is dependent on the apology. You don't need your parents' permission to heal your inner child. You don't need their acknowledgement of we hurt you. No, it's important for you to tell yourself, I know what I went through, it matters to me, it hurt me. So it's a lot of internal validation. Yeah, it's switching from that external validation and wanting that external validation to now giving yourself the validation that you were never given.
Yeah.
I think that's just the first step. And then of course naming what you feel.
Yeah.
Really naming what you feel through journal, therapy, inner child work, so that you can actually understand what you feel and what you've gone through. And then now you can reparent yourself with kindness, with the tenderness that you never received. Yeah, and boundaries, of course.
Yeah.
I think it's important to set some boundaries with people who have chosen to not see you for you.
Okay.
If they continue to deny your reality, then I don't think it's wise for you to stay in those situations. So just creating boundaries to protect yourself.
Yeah. You have already, like, I think, swept over my final point, which was about breaking the pattern. So you've talked about we name the role that we play, we grieve what we didn't receive, and then I guess this would be the challenge where we need to learn to relate to our siblings as adults or as friends, but not as competitors. So maybe you can walk us through just briefly. If you are the favored one, I guess it definitely comes with some form of guilt. How do they release the guilt? And if you are the scapegoat or the black sheep, how do you set these boundaries?
Okay,
for
so
either role.
Yeah, so what does healing look like for either
Yes.
roles? Okay. I think first for the golden child, it's authentic self-expression.
Okay.
It's learning to say what you mean, say what you feel, and not be afraid of people like rejecting you because of that.
Okay.
It's allowing yourself to rest, allowing yourself to not overperform, to not overfunction, like literally resisting the pressure to overdo.
Okay.
At work, anywhere, in your friends, in family, just telling yourself, I don't have to perform in order for people to love me.
Yeah.
And then I think for the scapegoat, a big part is self-trust.
Okay.
Because you've been invalidated so much that you don't even trust yourself, you don't trust your thoughts. And so you may find you tend to over-explain yourself. So the minute you feel that, just be like, okay, why am I over-explaining myself? Why do I feel like I need to show these people who I am? And then allowing yourself to exist in spaces where you don't have to fight to be seen, you don't have to go the extra mile in order to be seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also I think for both, it's grieving for the golden child. It's grieving the cost of being idealized as a child. As a golden child, you don't get to connect with people emotionally because you've connected with them according to the costume that you had, the mask that you had. And so when you break those chains, you'll realize that, oh, people have never known me.
Yeah.
And so you feel like a sense of loss. So it's just accepting that, yes, it happened, but now you have space for more authentic conversations.
Yeah.
And as for the scapegoat as well, it's grieving that identity of being the bad child or the wrong person. Because if you continue to see yourself as that, then, I mean, it's hard to heal, because now you come from the baseline of, I'm already bad, I'm already wrong, so let me just overextend, let me overdo, let me show these people that I'm not that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have two questions before we close off. One is when there's a big like a huge age disparity between siblings, and how they would potentially bridge that gap, because sometimes I'll speak from like my own personal experience. If I'm getting into a fight, let's say with my younger brother, and I'm just, which currently we're in a fighting lol, but it's like, am I to demand emotional intelligence from someone way younger than me, and how to make peace with that as the adult? Okay, not that he's not an adult, but there's a significant age gap. I'm just like, yeah, here it would be like fighting with a wall. So that's number one. And then number two, I seem to have lost my train of thought. Yeah, let's first answer that
Yeah,
one.
we could start with
when it comes
that.
to age disparities.
I think with dealing with someone, a sibling who's much younger, you really need to take yourself back to, okay, when I was 10, how
Okay.
did I used to think? You need to take yourself back to that age in order for you to understand how you can communicate with them better. Because you can't sit here and tell them, you're the scapegoat, you're the... You don't understand that language.
Yeah.
So whatever communication you use has to be sensitive to their age, because you can't expect a 10-year-old to reason in the way that you do. They don't know everything that you do. They don't communicate in the way that you do. And I think also you communicating your struggles to them normalizes it as well, because then I think as a child you think all older siblings have their life together, everything is going great. I mean, don't emotional dump, but just be like, oh yeah, I had a hard day, can we bake? Or you know, so even just creating rooms to exist just as siblings and to have like a good time together as well.
Yeah. When it comes to repairing of sibling relationships, what would be your advice in the scenarios where we've seen people, one expresses the need to repair and the other couldn't be bothered? So is it you join the unbotheredness, or you continue in the fight, or I don't know what floated, you know, role or place that would put someone in?
Yeah. This is on the perspective of the one who wants to repair and the other one doesn't.
Or either side. You'd find a case of, let's say we are siblings, and you are trying to repair or mend or even create a relationship outside of the sibling roles and actually be friends, and then I couldn't be bothered.
Yeah.
So what would your advice be for the other? Because ideally people would say meet each other in the middle, but what is that even middle like?
I think it's just radical acceptance.
Really?
Yeah, because it's just like I said before, you can only repair when both parties are willing.
Yes.
Because you can't force someone. It's like when you break up with someone and they don't want to get back to you, you'd be like, come here now, let's get back together. No, so I think there's a lot of radical acceptance there, but that doesn't mean that all is lost. I think for maybe the other party who wants to repair but their sibling doesn't want to repair, it's now for you to take charge of your personal healing. So all these sibling roles also show up in other relationships. Think of like that friend who's a firstborn in your friendships. It's because that's a role they've played at home. So it's now unlearning those things in your other relationships, so that you also examine and see, where am I taking this role of the golden child to other relationships? Where else am I behaving like this? So heal all those other relationships as well. So it's not just saying, okay, I'm radically accepting that my sister or brother doesn't want to work on our relationship and leaving it there. It's okay, how else can I heal my other relationships? And hopefully they'll turn around. I usually feel that in a lot of cases the siblings do turn around at some point with
eventually.
age and time. With age and time you miss your siblings.
Okay, alrighty. So I had one more question. Some of them just keep coming up as we proceed. Which one was it? Just give me a second. Yes, I've remembered. The resentment that builds from the parentified sibling. Because we've talked about resentment, I guess, between siblings, and this could be based on like competition, but also I don't think we've talked about the parentified sibling, who I am assuming, I don't know if I would, because I've noticed based on the circumstances which are unique, you'd find even a parentified sibling as a middle child, as
so actually the parentified child is the caretaker or the hero. This is the one who's given all those responsibilities. Wash your sister, take your sister to school, pick your sister up, do this, do that, or sometimes even taking care of your parents. That's the one who gets all the fights you're hearing. Everyone is coming to you, your siblings are coming to you, you're like a deputy parent.
So thank you so much, Melissa, for coming. Maybe you can share with us where we can find you on socials, your practice, anything you'd like for the friends to support.
Before I say that, if any of the roles in this conversation feel like you, I think it's important for you to know that you can rewrite the script. You are allowed to be whoever you want to be, despite whatever you had to be when you were younger. You can find me everywhere as Melissa Kyoko, so that's Instagram, LinkedIn if you'd like. I don't use my TikTok, but I'm mostly active on Instagram. And to book a session as well, the link is over there.
The link is in her bio, but we'll leave it in the description box down below. Thank you so much for watching this episode. We hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Melissa. As Melissa has said, we are allowed to grieve the versions of family that we didn't experience, and we are allowed to rewrite our story, and we are allowed to love our siblings while still acknowledging the wounds or the heart that is between us. So thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you like this video, leave a comment down below, and of course join our amazing SNS family. That is it from us, and we will see you in the next one.